only the NBA, but welcome back to the 5 and 5 video. Hey, if you joined us yesterday, we took a small little departure and got you ready for baseball because we're going to transition to that once the NBA is done. And we went 4 for 4. Now we had a void, so we went 4 for 4 and we smashed. So we're off to a 4-0 start in the young Major League Baseball season. It's got to be good, man. The vibes, the momentum. Let's keep it rolling. We got a battle tonight. Old-time knockdown, drag-out between the Boston Celtics and Philadelphia 76ers. But we've got 4 other things to hit, too. So you're going to hit the thumbs-up button and subscribe. I'm going to hit the clock, and we're going to roll 5 bets in 5 minutes. Now, we start with the Miami Heat. I told you, so long as we have a total that's south of 221, we are going over. And the Miami Heat, whoa, come on, slow down. Look at what they've done last couple of games. It's been rough at Toronto, at New York. They break out against Dallas, but everybody breaks out against Dallas. Slow down. When they've beaten over the last chunk of games, when they're taking on worse teams, they're scoring points. When they're beating up bad teams or just playing bad teams, that's the big thing, is they're moving forward now and putting up a lot of points. Allowing points too, but that comes in the nature of the pacing. Even Memphis, but then you look at Chicago, Detroit, they just did this. Took on Detroit at Detroit. We'll be okay here. There's going to be some points scored, and I want to be a part of it. We move on. Way too big of a spread here. I know Charlotte got worked last time that we talked about them, but Toronto is a team that is still desperate, is still tight, but I don't necessarily know what's been figured out on the road. So I get it that this is going to be still must-win scenario for a team in Toronto who has clinched a spot at the very least in the playoffs. But play in. But they still haven't figured anything out. They're awful on the road. They're the worst road team of the 4 current play-in type scenario squads that are around. And while Orlando still has some life, it's pretty much set right now. So Toronto is not a good road team. And I don't think that they've proven anything that a lot of confidence in this Raptors team since they've clinched a play-in spot. Charlotte is nobody, and we know how this thing works, where they just are playing for jobs and playing for minutes, and you have guys that are going to be trying much harder with nothing to lose versus guys with everything to lose in the tight Raptors squad. Absolutely, we keep it moving. More sides. I want a part of Brooklyn. Let's go. The Brooklyn Nets right now have defied a lot of the odds and a lot of the narrative and a lot of the other shit that have been piled up on their shoulders since the departure of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Wow, look at this team. Not only have they won 3 straight, but they've started to settle after a rough stretch. Now, here come the Minnesota Fighting Orfield Lindquist.
What is happening, everybody? It is time to break down another Reignmakers slate for DraftKings. So last week, Eric and I broke down the PGA slate, and Eric came in pretty big. I'm sure that Eric remembers that he correctly guessed who was going to win the tournament last week. He went with Corey Connors. Now, how much credit do we give him, right? Because Corey Connors was a big favorite to win the event. He was the betting favorite.
So. No, he was not. No, he wasn't. Tyrrell Hatton.
Well, you know what? You're right. Never mind. I take it back. So Eric does get a little bit of credit, not too much, right? We don't want to get him too full in his bridges over there. But it is true. You went with Corey Connors. He ended up winning. Connors is in the field again this week. And something else that Eric had given out as good advice, I'm going to give you a lot of praise here, is he had said not only was Connors a good play for Rainmakers last week, but he was also going to be somebody you guys wanted to get some cards of because he was somebody that Eric was also going to like this week at Augusta. So something to keep in mind that Eric's already given you guys some good advice to help you build out some of your lineups. And there are massive contests over at DraftKings. So if you guys have not checked out Rainmakers yet, you're watching the video, so it seems like you have some interest. Claim your starters pack. You click on the link below. That is going to bring you over to DraftKings, and you are going to get a set of players totally for free when you sign up using that link over for PGA Reignmakers. And you're going to be able to build your lineups around some studs as well. And just to reiterate how the packs work, you do get to pick a stud golfer as part of your pack. Eric, now we've got some odds for this week, and we've got, some dust settled in terms of what we could expect. If you had to pick one stud as part of the starters pack, who do you think people should pick if they're claiming it right now?
Scotty Scheffler. He won the event last year. He's playing really good golf, got to the Final Four of match play, won at the Players' Championship. He's the most expensive golfer on the board. I think there's an argument to be made for Rahm if you really want to go that direction as well. But because we're not as worried about ownership until a lot of the booster packs get caught up and bought, and there are some amazing packs to buy for this week specifically that have some gated contests, some utility going forward. You're going to want to check some of those out as well, the approach packs and things of that nature. But Jon Rahm, there is an argument to be made to go get him, but Scotty Scheffler, he will not be as owned as he would be in a DFS contest. We're playing DFS contests for this, but everybody's going to be lower owned because if you don't have the card, you can't play them. So I think one of those two, kind of a no-brainer situation.
And we do have free projections over at Stokastic.com. I just posted those into the YouTube chat. It's totally free to look at and really useful data. So what you're going to see here, as our wonderful producer, Mike Lawrence, has already thrown this up on screen, you're going to have the top player probability, which is just the odds of each individual golfer to be the highest scoring at Augusta this week. Top 5 probability, that is each golfer's odds to be a top 5 scorer relative to the other players we have in the Rainmakers pool. And then also we've got the sportsbook odds. This is just, the DK odds, what everybody's listed right there at the sportsbook. And then the make cut probability, that's where we're projecting each golfer's odds to make the cut. And it's Augusta. It's a smaller field. So you're going to see some really high cut probabilities. Rory McIlroy, 96%, Scotty Scheffler, 95.5%, Jon Rahm, 93.5%. Just the nature of this being a smaller field event and just more guys making it through to the cut. So a lot of these stud golfers, you will see that in our projections, they are near locks to end up making it through and make it into the weekend as far as the tournament goes. But Eric, also, if you take note of some of our projections here, pretty big gap on the high end. Top scoring golfer probabilities. We've got Rory and Scotty Scheffler way ahead of the rest of the field. Rory McIlroy, 16%, Scotty Scheffler, 14% odds. This is for them individually to be the highest scoring golfer. So with that in mind, we're looking at about a 1 in 3 chance that McIlroy or Scheffler ends up being the top scoring golfer. Do you view them as being golfers who are on a tier of their own?
Yeah, they are. Scheffler hasn't seen the golf course as much as Rory has. Rory, it's wild that he hasn't won this event before because this is a golf course that's just kind of tailor-made to him. You can bomb driver everywhere. It's not super insanely demanding in terms of iron play, but it feels as though one of those places where you kind of navigate it off the tee and bomb it. You're set up with some short iron, set up to do some things that Rory McIlroy is just better at than everybody else. I feel pretty confident about Rory having a good week this week. He made a really big charge during the tournament last year. So I feel pretty good about having some access to him. If you wanted to do your starter pack and start with him, I don't hate it, but because he's going a little bit cheaper than that of Scheffler, and because we're projecting him as a top player probability, there's no way around it. If you have Rory McIlroy, you're probably going to be captaining him this week.
Yeah, and that is something to consider, as well as who we'd want to have the top overall captain to be in some of our lineups to target. And I think it really does have to be one of these guys, if you have access to them, right? If you have a card of McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, these should be your captains because the captain spot, those golfers are going to score 1.5x their fantasy points. And you could see, this gap that we have in terms of our projections, Rory being 1, Scotty Scheffler not too far behind. And then we've got Rahm, not really, I would say, a distant third, but there's a little bit of a gap between him and the top 2. So I'm wondering, how do you view Rahm, who he's obviously been one of the best golfers over the last year, and he went on a crazy stretch where it was how many tournaments in a row did he finish in like top 10, or was he at least contending to win tournaments? So how do you view Jon Rahm relative to Scheffler and McIlroy as far as how much you're going to prioritize getting cards of him to play in tournaments this week?
Yeah, I mean, he's won 3 of the 7 events that he's played so far this year. So he's definitely a priority. Again, if you have your starter pack and you start with him, awesome. He's also the second most expensive golfer in the core contest. You're looking at Scottie Scheffler being around $45, Jon Rahm being short of $35. So if you want to be fading Scottie Scheffler, I almost said shading Scottie Scheffler. That would have been fun. But looking at Rahm on the board right now, I find him to be a fantastic option as well. Rory sitting there around the same range in terms of cost. I think they're both fantastic plays. I mean, if you had your lineups where you had Scheffler, Rahm, and Rory, because there's no salary cap in something like Reignmakers, you have an opportunity to really stack your team up. I do want to try to find a couple of ways to be contrarian, or to be able to find some sleeper plays that maybe nobody else is going to be on. But because these cards all have utility past this week, so it's not like you're spending the amount of money that you are for these cards just to play in the Masters. So you have the elite players throughout an entire FedEx Cup that's going to be coming up, 3 other majors that are coming up. It's hard to deny that if you were to have those 3 cards alone, that you're not sitting in a phenomenal spot from now until eternity.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the pricing of these golfers right now, we have Jon Rahm. The cheapest core card available of him is $34.84. Rory McIlroy, $35. And then Scottie Scheffler now $44.94. So at least that's how the market is viewing it. The market does appear to be higher on Scottie Scheffler than they are on Rory or Jon Rahm. Based on our projections, my priority would be, based on the current prices, to go and target Rory, at least for this week, considering that, like I said before, we've got him with the best odds of being the top overall scorer. We've got him with the best odds of a top 5 probability. Not all that dissimilar from Scottie Scheffler, but his cards are quite a bit cheaper than Scheffler's, which I do think gives him a little bit of a leg up, at least in terms of that kind of points per dollar. But let's look at the next tier of golfers then, because somebody who stands out, who also happens to be the cover athlete of the show that we're doing, which people think that means something. It doesn't really. It just happens to be coincidence that Tony Finau is on the cover of our show. That is the graphic we have up there. He also projects exceptionally well for us. Tony Finau, of the next group of golfers, so if we take Rory, Scheffler, Rahm out of it, Finau projects next best for us. So what are your thoughts on Finau heading into Augusta, when he's somebody who looks like he is the next best of the rest of the golfers in our projections?
Yeah, this is a golfer that I think wins a major this year. I am obsessed with Tony Finau for this event specifically. One thing we haven't talked about is the projected weather, where it's going to be a little bit softer. They do have some underground subterranean madness going on over at this golf course. So I will say it won't be like soaking wet by any means. They'll still be able to dry it out to a certain extent, but it's supposed to rain basically the entire golf tournament until Sunday. It's supposed to get really chilly over on Saturday as well, looking at sub 55 degree temperatures. And this guy is just a ball striking extraordinaire. And he's found some insane form with his irons actually here in the course of the last year. 3 of his last 4 tournaments here, the Players, Arnold Palmer, Genesis, Waste Management, he's gained at least 4.3 strokes with the approach. That kind of stuff is getting it done at any golf course. And he's lost strokes off the tee now at the Genesis and the Players, but the Players one, I'm just going to be neglecting, because you have water that just creates higher variance at a golf course like TPC Sawgrass. So I'm feeling abnormally confident, because I think around the green game might not have the same demand that it normally would if this golf course were going to be firmer and faster than I project it to be. So Tony Finau, that's by far the weakest part of his game. If he can just be serviceable in that department, there's no way that I don't think he competes this week.
And then is there anybody else who you would look at as being a possible beneficiary of the weather and the conditions for this week?
Viktor Hovland. So this is the kind of pairing that I'm looking at in terms of Reignmakers. I try to get some skill sets to combine with my players. And last week we talked about cards that have extra utility, whether it was Corey Connors, Sepp Straka, another guy that was really, really cheap. Now his card's at least going for like around $6 and things of that case. But I think Viktor Hovland really benefits from this weather as well. because he's just another player like Tony Finau where and it's exponentially worse with Victor Hovland because he's kind of broken in terms of around the green game. Amongst this field, he's 101st in terms of strokes gained around the green. That's basically just losing strokes every single time. He's actually lost strokes chipping the golf ball in every single tournament this entire season. But he still found ways to get a 10th at the Arnold Palmer and a 3rd at the Players because he gains just such a ridiculous amount of strokes gained tee to green. 5+ in his last 3. The putter's been positive in the last 2. And when that putter spikes, he's going to win a major pretty soon too in the next couple of years. So Victor Hovland and Tony Finau is a pairing that I'm going to be having a lot in Reignmakers this week.
Yeah. And by the way, Victor Hovland, also somebody who projects pretty well for us. We have him with the 12th best odds to win. So 2.3%, but then also a 12.1% chance to be one of the top 5 scoring golfers for Reignmakers purposes. Now we've got some questions in the YouTube chat as well. So let's dive into some of those. And I can't even, so we've got right here, Pete Shepard. And for whatever reason, I'm looking through this. It looks like half the people in chat are named Pete or Patrick, but this is Pete Shepard. He wants me to make you cry, Eric, which it becomes, a pretty regular thing around here. As a lot of people know, I have this, Yeti water bottle that I only keep Eric's tears, and it's how I hydrate during the day. Very salty. It's very good for the electrolytes. But Eric picked the outright winner last week. I can't besmirch him anyway. I gotta big him up for that a little bit. So Pete, very rare I do this, but I'm going to have to decline making Eric cry today. Maybe later on, the next time we do a live before lock together, I'm sure I will, but not today.
If Sam Burns plays like garbage next week, you can make me cry on the show. That's fair.
And we got a super chat from our guy, Jorge Giacomi, just stopping by to say thanks to Eric. Helped me cash 3rd place in the PGA Mini Max, my 3rd time trying this sport when I don't know anything. Thanks, and looking forward to your picks for Thursday. Eric, more people giving you credit. How do you feel about people saying positive things about you? It doesn't always happen around these parts.
Yeah, warm and fuzzies. I tell you, this is nice. I'm going to have the PGA First Look. That'll be coming out here on this Tuesday as well. I'm going to have more Reignmakers content for you guys. You guys can check that out here this afternoon, as well as, doing my best 9 bets. You can check out DraftKings Sportsbook, take advantage of some of those numbers, primarily focused on them for this content. So lots of opportunities that we have to make some money at the Masters. But Jorge, love seeing it. Glad Corey Connors came to fruition for both of us.
And we've got another question here from our guy, Ryan Renebaum, who's pretty regular around watching our NBA shows that we do each night. But he's got a PGA question for us here. And Eric, he wants to know, is Shane Lowry a reasonable captain choice to be different this week? So he doesn't have the best odds in the world relative to the other golfers that we have projected here. We got Shane Lowry, just a 0.9% chance to be the top scoring golfer in the field. Is he somebody you would consider for the captain spot, though?
So this is really kind of like, if he's your best available golfer, you play him. I know part of the allure to me of Reignmakers as well is not necessarily just having the best cards and playing the best cards every single week, although that is a fantastic strategy to go forward with, but trying to find ways of being contrarian. And then if you have a Shane Lowry build, who do you really put around him to match skill sets? So we've seen Shane Lowry finish 14th at the Genesis, really started to flip some of the issues that we had seen kind of spike into his putter in recent weeks. It came back at the Players where he lost 4.2 strokes in that department. But we know he's going to be a good driver of the golf ball. We know he's going to spike with the irons from time to time and finish 5th at the Honda, stuff like he did there earlier. But the big question mark I have is I think Shane Lowry is kind of the build you want if the weather is going to be atrocious. We think it's going to be blowing. If we think it's going to be windy, I would be looking at pairing him with not necessarily just saying, with Europeans, but there's guys like Seamus Power who have really shown a proclivity for open championship style golf. Some of the Euro Tour guys who do see more weather than what you're going to see playing dome golf, so to speak, here when you start in California and then Florida at the beginning of the PGA Tour season. So I think Shane Lowry is an interesting captain if I'm going to build some contrarian, crappy weather teams around him.
Yeah, I would say just my 2 cents on this, though. If I'm using Lowry at the captain, the rest of the lineup should be fairly chalky. I don't want to be totally contrarian with Lowry at captain, and then you're just playing other kind of mediocre golfers. Where I think it would make sense, if you have, let's say you have Lowry, you have a card of him, you're going to play him. and you already have Rory, you already have Scheffler, you already have Rahm, golfers that we do think are going to be, fairly grouped together when people just go out and they're trying to buy the top overall projected golfers and pair them together. I think I'd be more apt to use Lowry in that kind of scenario because that could differentiate you in a lineup that has Rory, that has Scheffler, that has Rahm. I wouldn't just go out and specifically target lineups to have Lowry at the captain because I do think there's too much opportunity cost just in terms of raw projection and fantasy points.
I totally agree with that, but there's also utility in trying to, like, if you're going to be playing in the single entry, like for me, I'm going to play all my best cards in a lot of the single entry contests that they have on Reignmakers. So it can be contest selection a little bit. If the weather, again, ends up being brutal at a certain time too, I think doing a tee time draw possibly. We don't have the tee times here yet, but maybe finding Shane Lowry with a grouping of players that tee off around him, at least for those first 2 days, and maybe finding the right pocket of the draw for Thursday, Friday. I think that might be another underrated approach to maybe trying to pair that, considering you're only playing 5 golfers as opposed to a traditional DFS lineup where you have 6. It should be easier to pull off.
And we have another super chat coming in here. This one is from Pete Shepard, one of the many Pete's and or Patrick's that are watching the program right now. Pete wants to know, can Niemann finish in the top 10 this week? If I'm not mistaken, there are no Reignmakers cards for Joaquin Niemann, so we do not have to worry about him, at least from that aspect. But is Niemann somebody you think is alive to have a top 10 finish, Eric?
Yeah, so I guess the underrated part of this is we have no live golfers that are going to be available on Reignmakers. Obviously the PGA Tour probably didn't want to necessarily go out and publicize them. I think that makes sense to me to a certain extent, but Joaquin Niemann can always show flashes. I think he's going to finish like DFL in some tournaments over the course of these 4 majors. I also think he's probably going to compete at one of them. I'm not positive that Augusta National is just tailor-made towards his game. I think there's other live players that I might be more interested, obviously DJ, things of that nature, but he's a young player. He still has a ton of talent. The Chilean has tons of game. It's just so hard to assess these skill sets. And I think that flying blind with some of the live players is going to be one of the big narratives we have from a DFS perspective on DraftKings this week. I think he's very talented. I think for 7,800 for the DFS market sounds great, but don't have to be worrying about him for Reignmakers. But I think there's probably other live players. As gross as it is to say, Koepka, Patrick Reed, who's had a great pedigree on this golf course. I know nobody likes to click those names. I prioritize both of them considering they're a little bit cheaper. I believe, well, for sure, you have Patrick Reed cheaper there than what we have for Joaquin Niemann.
Yeah, and by the way, Niemann has never had a top 20 finish at a major ever in his career.
Never.
So not something that I'm saying that should be the end all be all, but just some information based on that. Like if Pete, you're just asking us yes or no, will Niemann finish in the top 10? It's most likely not, would be my guess.
Yep.
Now let's look at, we've talked about some of the top end golfers. Let's move down and look for some cheapies, Eric. Any dark horses that you like for this week? Any really cheap cards you think are maybe more live than what the market thinks they are?
Yeah, I guess live is probably a little bit relative. One card that I think is just way too cheap. Adam Svensson's been sub $5 here the entire week. And if you're trying to build out some cheaper lineups that are going to have utility, think about golfers that are going to play in almost every single tournament, whereas the top players, you're only getting access to some of them on odd weeks. And of course, they're the best players in the world. You're going to want to play them when you have them. But a player like Ryan Svensson, who first trip to Augusta, lots of opportunities for the Canadian to move up in terms of rankings, points, everything else. But this guy is going to play in just about every single available tournament going forward. Decent enough ball striking pedigree. And I don't want to call him Corey Connors because he is nowhere near as good as Corey Connors, but it's done a little bit in the same style where we're going to see him be really good with the irons from time to time. That's the best part of his golf game. The putter's been pretty decent amongst comparing it to this field. For sub $5, the man won the RSM at the tail end of last year. Bermuda seems to be his preferred surface. He has a 9th and a 13th already in the fall, and the 13th was at the Players, the 9th at the Genesis. Those are really strong field events. So for sub $5, I think my favorite bargain player that nobody's talking about is Adam Svensson.
Did you know, this seems unrealistic to me. Mike Lawrence, you're Irish?
What?
Okay, so because first of all, you're the tannest Irishman I've ever seen before. I never would have guessed that you're Irish. I mean, I know you burn easily. Yeah, I know. I know you burn easily because you send me pictures of your sunburns when you've gone out in the sun for a couple minutes without lathering yourself in sunscreen. But totally, totally earth shattering to me. I thought you were South American in some way. So there we go. All right, learned something new today, Mike.
Yeah,
Lawrence.
I was gonna say, no idea.
Of Irish descent. Interesting. I would have had
Philly
you pegged
fan
as
too.
Colombian. You learn something new every day. So we talked about Svensson. Svensson, way off the board, but like you said, also somebody who's really cheap. And, maybe I'm going to phrase this a different way. Is there somebody you think is live to win that is also really cheap?
See, that's the difference. If the weather gets bad, I brought him up earlier when the pairing with Shane Lowry, and there was no coincidence. I think Seamus Power is somebody to kind of keep your eye on. Another Irishman. Look at the theme that we have going here. Seamus Power, a couple wins now on tour, has found some form. He's really, really good in these kind of conditions that we're projecting. Wet, going to be brutal out there. It's not a huge sample size that we have on him compared to other players here at Augusta, that's for sure. But I think he's going to play pretty well this week. I just kind of have him targeted. He's already got 3 top 10s for this season already, and most of those in weaker field events. But I feel like Seamus Power, we can get him sub $8, feels like good lineup filler. I think that's probably the best way to describe him. If you have players like Xander Schauffele, if you have Cantlay, if you've got some of those players that are in that $20 range and you're looking for a player, hey, I don't want to be spending $20, $25 to round it out with somebody in that same skill set, and you're just looking for somebody sub $10, I think you could do a lot worse than Seamus Power.
Right. Yeah. And another one you guys could see on screen right there. We've got some of his core cards available for as little as $7.75. That is currently the floor on him. And I'm also just kind of scrolling through our projections. And another angle I want to ask you, is there anybody you're fading? Is there anybody you're avoiding who you think is overvalued by the market, or somebody that you just don't think is maybe the best fit for this course and that you are not going to be playing and maybe hoping doesn't go off and finish with like a top 5 or anything?
I'm a little bit nauseous about this because I think this is like known as one of my guys. But it's really hard to be paying $20 for Justin Thomas with his current form. We're seeing him around the green. That's where he's kind of been exceptional. But if I'm going on this narrative that chipping, if bunker play, if a lot of these things that, traditionally when you look at a Masters, there's some extra boosts you can give to some of the strokes getting around the green, having some familiarity with the golf course, everything can look good there. But this man has been broken with a putter, and somebody is going to putt well here at Augusta. I just don't see it being Justin Thomas right now. He's lost in 4 of his last 5 events with that flat stick. The only time he gained was at the Genesis, and he was bad with the approach, so it didn't even necessarily matter. We saw him put together one good week at the Waste Management for the Phoenix Open, but amongst the top tier players, especially when you're thinking about these starter packs about who could I start with to get contrarian, Justin Thomas just really isn't making the cut. I do have some cards of him, so I'm going to be utilizing him just by default. It's not like I'm going to be fading him outright, but if I were looking to start a lineup and I were building for the Masters, I think he's probably like the last guy amongst the $15 up guys that I would want.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And that bears out in our projections as well, because, right now, if you do look at who we have projected relative to the top end golfers that are available in starters packs, we've got Justin Thomas well behind guys like Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy. In fact, the guys who are at the top of our projections, Rory and Scotty Scheffler, we've got them with about 5 times better chance compared to Justin Thomas just to be the top scoring golfer this week. So definitely when you're considering that, if you guys are picking your starters pack right now, Justin Thomas is the last golfer I think I'd want to pick for that. Given all of the options, he would be somebody who would really be just a non-consideration for me. So Justin Thomas,
Ooh.
Oh yeah, we could open up Mike Lawrence's starter pack.
Fire it up. We've got the Georgia edition. No, it's the Georgia edition, the free starter pack that you get for this week. So check that out.
And if you guys want to claim one, there's a link below. You can click on that. It'll direct you right to DraftKings to claim it. I hope that they give him nothing but Irish and potentially a couple of Colombian golfers to really match up with his background here.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Here we go. This is a fun way to go out with it.
All right.
Oh, he got Scheffler right off the bat. Are you joking me?
All right. So Scotty Scheffler.
What an absolute bomb. You can open them all here. Tony Finau.
Oh, all right. Just all the, so he's going to get, he's just going to get all the guys that project best for us.
I didn't see that serial number though, too. Can you just rapid fire open them? You can click the thing at the bottom. Keegan Bradley. I didn't see who that was. I saw Molinari. We don't want that.
All right.
Kelly Craft. I didn't see the other one. I'm going to watch it on my screen here on repeat. Cam Champ.
I'm trying to look on my screen. So he got Brennan Todd. Got Molinari. Champ.
All I know is that all that matters is he got Scheffler and Finau. If you can't ask for two golfers that I would want to have more than Scheffler and Finau. Two guys I'm just absolutely obsessed with this week. So Mike Lawrence running good. He's got Irish eyes are smiling.
Running very good, Mike Lawrence. So yeah, pretty good start there. So Mike could build out some lineups based on that right there. And then also, like I said before, if you guys want to claim a starters pack, there's a link below in the description box. You click on that, it's totally free, and you can build lineups right off those golfers you get in that starters pack. So Eric, just a couple minutes left before we go here, and I would be remiss if I did not ask you, where does Tiger Woods finish this week?
Oh no, I knew this was going to come at some point. Tiger Woods. He only needs to, I believe he's made 23 or 24 consecutive cuts at the Masters, which again, it's a smaller field event. You would expect, the greatest golfer of all time to be making a lot of cuts here, but it is very difficult for me to want to be clicking on him. He feels as though he was always going to be overvalued in terms of a Reignmakers card. He's only playing in like 6 or 7 events this entire year. He's really, really limited in terms of what events he's going to be playing. He might only play the majors this year. Like, that's a very live consideration. And he's going for 750. We saw him at the Genesis. The ball striking looked all right. Walked around okay. But, I mean, it's just so difficult for me to imagine a scenario where he's going to be competing this week. This is a lot different than when we saw him win back in 2019, considering the major difference. He had a car crash and his leg is just shattered in a bunch of places, and he's getting around a lot more gingerly than before. So I watched him play at Augusta live in person last year. It was incredible. Could not believe he made that cut. I will say, I think he's far more live to be missing a cut than somebody that you need to have in your Reignmakers lineups.
So our projections on Tiger Woods, we have him with a 0.4% chance to be the top scoring golfer, 3.6% chance to finish in the top 5. We also only give him a 67% chance to make the cut. So those are our projections on Tiger Woods, but I know people like to hear about Tiger. So I wanted to ask about him before we left. And that's going to do it for us today, guys. If you didn't do it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, totally free starters pack. Start build out your lineups by claiming that. Click on the link below. That's going to do it for us. If you guys have any questions for us, hit us up on Twitter and we could answer some of those. Other than that, enjoy the tournament this week and good luck.